My name's Jeff Kellick. For those who don't know me yet, I'm our Chief Product Officer at LENSEC. And Bryce, I'll let you introduce yourself and your role. Why don't you go ahead and do that as well?
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. My name is Bryce Capodieci. I am a sales engineer for LENSEC. I work remotely in my home office in Morgantown, West Virginia. I provide technical support in various areas that include the implementation and installation of our video management software called Perspective VMS. I work with system integrations with our third-party devices, such as access control, and just expert level troubleshooting and tier 2 level support with our help desk.
Yeah, Bryce is one of our great sales and applications engineers, and we have a number of them at LENSEC. And shout out to Alman and Chris and Marciel too, who are probably watching this recording as well. And we'll have them on in various shows that we do throughout the next several weeks, as well as some of our regional sales managers. You'll get to see them on some of these sessions too. But really what we want to do is we want to take an opportunity to show some facets of Perspective VMS and give you some insights on it. And I promised today we were going to talk about automation. And so really that's where we're going to begin. We're going to talk about the ways in which Perspective uses something that we call workflows to automate your software response. And for that, I want to begin by showing our software. Enough of seeing our ugly mugs on the screen. Let's show a little bit of the software. And so I'm going to share my screen right now, and we'll see a little bit of that. And so this is Perspective VMS. This is actually a local instance. It's running inside my office here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we're going to use this today. We're going to talk about workflows. So workflows are found inside the administration module, the configuration, the setup of those workflows. So I'm going to navigate to that just by clicking on administration. And in preparation of today, I had already kind of come into the workflow section. And so it immediately brings me back to the workflow area. The whole idea of workflows, it's if this, then that type of logic, that reaction, right? So as we go through this, I'm in the administration section. If you haven't seen the administration section of Perspective VMS yet, we do have training courses online, our online academy. You can find all of that at lensec.com/training. And we welcome all of our end users, all of our value-added resellers to join us on that. But I'm going to come into the main administration section, and I'm going to start by just adding a workflow here. And so we're going to see what this dialog looks like. At the very beginning, you can see I have some basic information here that I can fill out and create new workflows. I'll go ahead and close that for 1 second and talk about the rest of the screen. You can see here that we have other workflows that were previously set up. In addition, something to note is that we allow users, we allow integrators, administrators, to configure soft buttons in the software as well. Over here on the right of my screen, I have different soft buttons that allow you to click and interact with the software, but sometimes we don't know everything that you're going to want to do as an operator. So we allow you to create what we call action buttons. And action buttons, they really can be anything. We can call an action button any name that we want, but the key here is that you can assign which user groups are going to have access to that action button. And that's going to come into play here in just a little bit as Bryce talks about triggers. An action button can actually be a trigger for a workflow. So one of these soft buttons here that you custom create can be one of those workflow triggers. So with that, let's look at these workflows. When you design a workflow, you want to give it a name. A lot of times people will give it a name that's descriptive. One that we're going to show later is a door station call button and what that does. Maybe we might want to set up something, call it a duress. There's many examples that you can have, and we'll talk through each of those. Once you've given that its basic information, and when you're ready to launch the workflow, you will want to make sure that it's enabled. So you can turn a workflow on and off, allow it to be enacted or not enacted just by making it enabled. So the next tab that we'll go through here are the triggers. And for the triggers, I'm going to turn it over to Bryce. And I'm going to let Bryce talk a little bit about our triggers that can start a workflow.
All right. So the triggers are the important part, which is what kicks off the workflow. And we have several different types of triggers that you can choose from the drop-down menu. I'll go through each one and talk about each one briefly. Now, as Jeff mentioned, you can create an action button. If you have them configured, they will appear here in the drop-down menu, or you can create a new one from this interface to create a new action button. Next item would be analytic rules. These could be set up to where you have exclusion lists or inclusion lists, maybe facial recognition. You can have a workflow created off that.
And let me just say something too on that analytic rule on those include and exclude lists. If you think about the different types of analytics, license plate recognition, face recognition, they can be very important on how you want to see what happens in the action. License plate is a common one, particularly in closed environments. Maybe it's a campus type environment where you're tracking who's coming in and going out of your campus, and you see a license plate of a vehicle that you had previously banned from that area.
Right.
You would want that to come up and create an action for you and do something about that license plate coming onto that facility.
Right. Yeah, you can create actions that will notify you by email, text, or throw a pen-tilt zoom camera on that license plate to follow that car. All right, so moving on to other triggers.
Oh, I think let me just clear that for you, Bryce.
All right.
There you go.
All right, thank you. All right, so next item would be at login. This is great so that you can be notified of any user who's logging into the system, or set up so that you can have specific users who log into the system. And alternatively, you could set up to where you can be notified if someone's actually trying to break into your account, maybe by brute force hacking. You can be notified by any failed attempts as well. And again, that can be set up through an email. Camera input trigger. This would be basically a hardwired switch into a camera that could react off maybe a gate. We have a customer, as you mentioned, Jeff, I believe oil and gas, where they have a site within a ranch, and when they open the gate, the camera will take a snapshot or start recording on that gate to make sure that the gate is closed. Different applications here.
Yeah, that camera input trigger, really that can be any dry contact that you wire into a camera. And the reason we want to make that available is most every camera that you have has at least one, maybe two inputs, and it can be very convenient when you're trying to get a trigger. Maybe it's a door that you don't have a door contact on through your access control, but you still want to be able to incorporate into your overall security system. Using the inputs on a camera is very helpful. And so really can be any example. Bryce just gave a great example of where there are remote areas, there's a camera, it's looking at that gate on that ranch. In this case, it's oil and gas, so it's kind of shared private space, and they're looking for right-of-way access. And when that gate opens, it becomes a liability. Of course, as you could imagine, if cattle leaves that area, I didn't know this, not being a rancher, but doing a lot of work in Texas, that's a pretty expensive loss there if they lose their cattle. So, wanting to understand who opened the gate and was that gate closed, those are very important bits of information so that they can react or respond to. And leveraging the inputs on a camera is a great way to do that.
Right. All right, on-camera event. This is a great tool to use. You can set up you can choose any camera within your system and have it create an event, whether it's an edge-based type event or a server-based, which would be Perspective VMS. So you can trigger off a particular camera, let's say motion activated after hours, you can be notified. Great tool to use. In addition to that, we have device event, which just like the cameras, you can set up to where you have a third-party integrated device such as access control. So you have access control on a door. If someone were to badge pass user badge into a particular door, you can get notified on that event. Camera could be focused on that door, and you'll get video capture of the person entering the premise.
Yeah, not just access control, but also not just valid access. I'm sorry, but also other types of door events. What that access control allows you to know. Not even just access control, can also be intrusion detection or RFID. Whatever devices are integrated within the system, you can use that. And again, the option for an include that event or an exclude that event.
Right. On server event, this is a great tool. Within VMS, within Perspective VMS, we have different reports that are run on demand. You could set this up to where you can be notified of these reports and schedule it with another trigger to where you can be emailed these reports on a regular basis or on a particular schedule. So you can be notified without having to run these reports on demand. These reports can be sent to you automatically. You can use this feature here. So as I was just mentioning, you would use this trigger in conjunction with the previous trigger to set up a specific schedule for those reports to be sent to you.
Yeah, we have a customer that they always want a report sent, but they want it on the third Friday of the month at 3 o'clock because their meeting with their board is the third Friday at 5 o'clock, and they want to show the history of the system, the health of the system, and a nice convenient report. So they asked their integrator. I shouldn't say this live on broadcast, but I'm giving away the secrets here. They asked their integrator to give them the report every Friday, and they're always so impressed because their integrator never forgets. Every third Friday, they always send the report. Well, the secret is it's automated, and they set up this schedule, and it always runs, and it always sends out that report.
Right. And the purpose of automation is to save you time and effort. So this is a great tool to use. All right, and then finally, the virtual input. This could be used to daisy chain several triggers in one. It can be used for several different options as well. An example I like to give would be, for example, with using analytics, you can use license plate recognition along with facial recognition. If you're driving up into your car, and you approach a guard station, the guard arm will rise automatically once those conditions are met. So you could also use this to daisy chain, as I mentioned before, the reports and the schedule. You put this together in this trigger as well. So I believe that wraps up our triggers.
Thank you, Bryce. I'll talk about actions for a little bit. So Bryce gave you a good overview of some of the things that can be the if-this part of the equation. Now let's talk about the then-that part of the equation. What can happen on all of those triggers that are coming out? First off, I'm going to start with archive configuration. We are a video management software, so one of the main things we want to be able to do is manage the video data that we're retaining for you. And so if there is a trigger that maybe it's a door forced open, maybe it's a motion detection at a time that it shouldn't be, something happens, maybe you want to change the frame rate or the resolution that you're recording. Lots of times to save space, you'll have a lower frame rate that you're archiving, you're recording, maybe 5-10 frames a second. This gives you the option to modify that through an automated control. So if we get a critical situation that occurs, we want to bump that frame rate up to 15, 20, 30 frames a second or beyond, really. So this gives you that option to make that change. I should also mention that these actions can happen in conjunction. And we're going to demonstrate one of those here at the end of this video segment, so please stay tuned and see how that actually happens. We're going to demonstrate a couple of things happening together simultaneously. You can have an audible output. The audible output on your workstation on your PC can ding to let you know that, hey, this workflow has been initiated, is happening. And you can define which user or which user group, a series of users, will get that audible output. The camera output trigger, just like the input trigger, in that we want to leverage what's on the camera, you can leverage those outputs. And when that contact shows that output, you can fire to a relay. You can do all types of things, open a door, sound a piezo device, do other things that you need to tie it to an access control system with just type of relay logic that you want to take advantage of. So you can use that output trigger from the camera. Device action. You can use the video management system through a workflow to change things on your devices. Maybe in this case, I'm looking at an access control scenario. I want to go ahead and I want to lock or unlock a door. based on that trigger event happening. That's another great thing. So we're actually going to show that exact example here at the end. Email notification. Email notification, one of the most common things that you want to see out of this. When we get an action that occurs, we want to tell somebody. And everybody is walking around with a smartphone. They've got email on demand. Not only can we bring up for a user, group of users, or external users this email notification, we can send additional recipients, but you can also include a snapshot of the tied event with that email and even an archive link. So if I'm logged in, I get the email, it opens it up for me. My permissions allows me to see that actual event occur. Great for video verification. That's a big deal. A lot of times, you know, in different states, there's different laws about video verification. When do police get called to come on site? When do responders get called? They don't want to be called out for false alarms. So you could have this tied to where it actually sends you the email link. You review it. You determine if it should be sent further. Or again, to your central station and other types of places too. Email notification, the absolute most common use of workflows. Pop-up screen. In version 4.1, we introduced the pop-up screen in Perspective VMS, which allows you to be notified on different events while you're working within the system. So you can use that as a triggerable event. The PTZ preset. Bryce mentioned it when he was talking about some triggers. PTZ presets, another very common thing. We love and we hate PTZs, right, in the security space. We love them because they give flexibility, they can move around, they can zoom in, but they are always looking in the wrong direction when something goes down, aren't they, Bryce?
Yes.
Yeah. So with the PTZ preset movement in the workflow, and this is one of the advantages of working remotely, you get to hear the peanut gallery in the background. With the PTZ movement, it allows you, when you get that trigger action at the door or at the gate like we talked about, allows you to move that PTZ directly to that focus point, directly to that area. So PTZ preset as part of the workflow really allows you to take advantage of that device, and then it's not looking in the wrong direction. Real-time extraction. Real-time extraction is a great tool, particularly in law enforcement. A lot of times we'll use real-time extraction on a trigger on a workflow, meaning maybe we don't want a room all the time archiving, all the time recording. A lot of times interview rooms are a great example of this, where we don't, you know, the witness comes in or the suspect comes in and they're not allowed to be recorded without their express consent. So you don't record unless you have an input trigger. Maybe it's a light switch, maybe it's a push button, whatever it is. And when that happens, that real-time extraction, then it creates that evidence right there for you. And then the next one, and this is another one that's very easy to demonstrate, and we're going to do so in this clip, is the user interface. You can change the user interface based on a trigger. So right now, we're looking at the interface of our administration module. But if I launch a trigger event, I can change that user interface for a user or an entire group of users for their environment. So it changes everything that they're looking at. This is a great thing to happen when you have a critical event. Maybe you want to have all the security operators, when somebody hits the duress button underneath the desk, you want the security operator screen to look at that office so they can see immediately without having to figure out which camera is that. You know, that's the East Administrative Office. Well, I forget which camera that was. Let me go look it up. And now you're losing critical seconds. You're losing time on how to respond to that event. And that's really comes back to the crux of this is automation. And being able to change the user interface really enables you to automate that responsiveness as part of the system. It allows you to navigate to any of the modules within Perspective VMS, even allowing you to determine when you're in that module what they're going to be able to see. Are they changing to a static view, a sequence view? One of the newer features we created a couple of versions ago from the triggering source. So if that input on the camera, and I keep looking to a camera, by the way. I've got a camera sitting on my desk. You guys will see in a second. when that triggers, then we want to be able to see that particular view. And so that's from the trigger source. And then the last one on here is, as Bryce mentioned, the last one on his list was the virtual input. I have the virtual output on the actions, and that allows you to daisy chain different events in and out. Okay. So now let's take a look at some of the conditions that can be discussed here, and I'll turn that over to you, Bryce, for a second.
All right. So when creating the workflow, we've created our triggers. We then create our actions. Now the next step is to allow the system to know when to kick off these workflows. So the default setting is going to be always in Perspective. But you have the option of creating schedules here by clicking the plus sign. And you may decide that you want to know when someone's entering the premise, whether it's allowed or not allowed. It could be during office hours, or if it's too much of a notification, you can set this up to where you're notified after hours. You can set up schedules where it's nights and weekends, maybe specific times in the evening that it could be a situation where you might have burglaries or vandalism. So you can set up these workflows to kick off. They don't necessarily have to run 24/7, which is what always would be set up for, but specific times where these workflows could kick off.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Being able to set up your workflows under different time parameters is a great conditional tool. Another one is, from the access control world. I know we have some integrators that are in that area. You've heard about the debound setting, is that you don't want to have a continuous trigger when the door is being blown open or bounced by wind. You don't want to keep running into itself and creating an infinite loop. So you do have the ability in the settings to withhold a subsequent trigger for a period of seconds after the last execution. And so, again, just from a kind of advanced setting point of view, you can control that. You can affect that. You can also allow the workflow to be run on demand. So this is great when you're testing it and you want to see what is the output going to look like when you can't get to the actual trigger source. You can run it from in the software and just have it run on demand. And then lastly, the history. You're going to see, I'm going to close this workflow. I'm going to go to an actual workflow that we have created here. And the history side of it shows you when this workflow was last executed, who was the author of this workflow. That comes in very handy, particularly when you have a lot of workflows set up. Who was the author? Who last modified it? When was it created? When was it last modified? And then when was it last executed? You can see this workflow that I'm about to execute was done here on earlier today at 10 o'clock. So we've talked, we've shown you the configuration, we've shown you the setup. I hope that was somewhat valuable, shown you all the different parameters that can be done there. Let's have some fun and let's show a workflow actual in practice. And I'm going to go to the camera viewer, field of view here right now. And on the camera viewer, I've got a camera sitting on my desk. And I'm looking at this camera. The reason I wanted to show this camera view is to illustrate that camera that I've got on my desktop. And that is an Axis door station, an Axis A8105 door station. And what's nice about this door station, it has a button. It's nice for this demonstration because it has a button. And so what you can look at with that is the ability to, if it were address, if it were in this case, an intercom button from it. But the action that we wanted to have happen from when I press that button, and I'll show you this configuration, this setup, the trigger is going to be that door station, and I'm pressing that call button. So that's our trigger. The action in this case is going to be, we're going to change the user interface for one user, and that user is going to be me. So it's going to change my user interface, and what it's going to do, it's going to change it to a static view, and it's going to change it to a status view of looking at that camera view. So that's what's configured to happen. Additionally, and I remember I said we can do multiple actions at once. Additionally, it's going to send me an email. It's going to send me an email with a door station alert, including a snapshot attachment, including the archive link, that this has happened, that this has taken place. Conditionally, it's set up to happen always. So anytime that button is physically pushed, the software is going to execute this command. And so let's see that happen. I'm going to do it from the live viewing screen. I'm going to do it from the live viewing screen here so you can see this happen in real time through our live stream. So I'm going to push the button. And you can see immediately it changed the screen to look at this view right here. And again, I can be in any screen. I can be back here in administration in any screen. When I push that button, it's going to go ahead and it's going to change that screen for me and bring me back to that field of view. So that's a great way to look at workflows. Just one example of how you can apply those triggers and actions. Again, it's if this, then that type of action. So I hope you guys got something out of that. Bryce, is there anything else you'd like to add for the group that's listening here today?
Just to reiterate that you don't necessarily just need one input. You could have several inputs. And just as Jeff has mentioned, you don't need to have one output. You could have several outputs. But the power of automation is the workhorse of Perspective VMS, and allows you to save some time and effort. That's
exactly right. And again, we hope maybe for a lot of our existing users out there, maybe that weren't familiar with some of the if this then that type of functionality, that maybe you can put some things in place now, especially since a lot of organizations have limited staff on site, and you want to be alerted when you're remote, when you're off site. And those are going to be more of the topics that we talk about in coming weeks, is working remotely, working with Perspective VMS remotely. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't reiterate again the fact that Perspective VMS is a browser-based application built on HTML5, allowing you ultimate flexibility on where you access that software from. So workflows are a great way that I can send alerts remotely, but even that user interface that you're looking at, that can be remote too. So you can be changing that screen for people that are hundreds, thousands of miles away, or even all the way across the globe. So we thank you again for joining us today. For Bryce and myself, as well as the team at LENSEC, we hope that you guys are doing your very best out there to get through the situation. If you need any support or any help, we're here. Lensec.com. Our support team is support@lensec.com. And again, we'll be happy to talk with you. And we look forward to another session next Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Central Time, to talk a little bit more about remote management and working with Perspective VMS. Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you. Everyone be safe.
Take care.